somebody else's and that's why you got it?
No, I read a lot about it.
Oh, okay.
I got speakers maybe with that before. So the Count Basie on it, kind of a real jazz. It sounds like real jazz. So now I'm probably gonna have to go buy something.
You did all that instrumentation. You been listening to vinyl with it?
It's on there. You can actually hear the, she's singing. You hear the melodies.
You gotta go listen to another album. Just listen to this Off the Wall and Off the Wall. His first one, but the other one,
Michael Jackson's still.
I think that was his first solo. Off the Wall. Solo. Wasn't it Off the Wall? But also, other one has.
You know what I like it is? That's it's.
But I'm trying to tell you about Quincy Jones. Quincy Jones did his first solo. And so you know the musicality is going to be good. So I'm saying that's good to listen to with good speakers. But I'm talking about it's Michael Jackson. What are you talking about? Off the Wall. No, but that's a good one. No, I'm telling you, little vinyl, you listen to the whole. I'm telling you, listen to the music. So I'm talking about with headset underneath Quincy Jones music. I'm telling you, check that out. The music on it is ridiculous. 2 minutes. I'm looking at the maybe the CD did it too, and somebody just said it out there. Anybody could say it. He done it way.
I want to start going through.
That was the first thing.
Really, real.
Get ready. Get ready, David.
Why do you think that? You're not saying songs.
I'll work it.
You gotta come and sing it.
I might want to put this in here.
Good morning, all. Good to see you. You know, in the past 8 months, we have heard many compare the Biden administration and presidency to Jimmy Carter days. But with the crisis after crisis continuing to unfold under the Biden watch, I now realize that comparison is an actual insult to Jimmy Carter. We aren't even to a year in this presidency, And President Biden has put this country in a constant state of crisis, day after day. We cannot and will not forget President Biden abandoning Americans through his disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. It's not just Americans that he abandoned. As we sat with the countries of United Kingdom and Australia yesterday, they too have their own citizens abandoned in Afghanistan based upon the decision by this presidency. His reckless exit ended up claiming the lives of 13 of our service members. And innocent civilians, including children, while he abandoned our own citizens in a Taliban stronghold and left behind billions of dollars worth of U.S. equipment, some of it even larger than our own NATO partners now have. American families are paying historically high prices for everyday goods, and their families, primarily the working class, will continue to bear the burden of rising costs for possibly the next several years. And as our small and local businesses look to regain their footing from the pandemic, they are faced with a government-caused labor shortage, forcing service disruptions. And this past weekend, we saw the starkest inflection point in President Biden and Vice President Harris' ongoing border crisis. Over 10,000 Haitian migrants crossing the border and setting up camp under a bridge outside of Del Rio, Texas. Their journey is a direct result of the Biden-Harris agenda that wants to grant them amnesty and a lifetime of government benefits. While women and children faced 100-degree weather, shortage of food and water, the administration's response remained non-existent. Where is the border czar? Vice President Harris. Tomorrow will mark the 6th month since she was appointed to this role. And in that time, the situation at the border has only continued to deteriorate. Over 1.2 million migrants have been apprehended since Biden and Harris took office. Under her control of the border, 970,000 with this border czar. For the last 2 consecutive months, illegal migrant encounters hit more than 200,000. How does that play in history? It's a 20-year high. 4,752 pounds of fentanyl seized since April. So if you're a city on the border, you think that's far away. That fentanyl comes to every element and every city in America. Congressional Democrats on Capitol Hill have been just as disconnected from reality. They're intent on making these problems much worse. Instead of addressing the concerns hurting our economy, stability, they are moving ahead with passing a massive $3.5 trillion spending bill, along with another trillion added upon that. Raise taxes, harm the middle class, and increase the inflation they have already created, shutting businesses, all while handling tax breaks to the rich. Democrats control every lever of the federal government, but they are acting like powerless bystanders, with a lame duck speaker who's more concerned about her last European tour and getting a $200 million earmark for her own district, instead of bringing Americans home from Afghanistan, putting the border in a secure position to save this country, and creating an economy that can continue to grow instead of harming it. America cannot continue down this path. We need a Biden-Harris administration and congressional Democrats to fix the nation's problems as opposed to worsening them than the ones that they have already created. I continue to listen to the Democrats on the other side of the aisle. Never before did I think I'd see an administration leave Americans behind. Never before did I think I would see the Democratic Party literally pull out funding for Israel because they couldn't even pass it. For defense of an Iron Dome. Every single Democrat voted no in the concept of bringing that back. It is a different time and place in our nation. I've never seen a majority party fail time and again and put this country further in debt by not even being able to pass their own funding bills, but only harming the small businesses that are just now getting out of a pandemic. With that, let's open it up for questions.
Leader McCarthy,
Yes, ma'am.
are you encouraging your members
You know, don't view it as a bipartisan bill any longer, where the Democrats have now made it one over $5 trillion bill, one without the other. It only harmed the nation even more. I'm voting no.
What about your members? Do you encourage them to vote no too?
Yes, I do. Yes, ma'am.
Can I follow up on that question?
Sure.
Senator McCarthy? A lot of the things in this bipartisan infrastructure bill are things that your members have backed in the past and are popular at home. What's your message to constituents, even in your district, who could get millions of dollars of money for roads and broadband?
No, you get, because you don't get millions of dollars for roads and broadbands. What you get is $5 trillion of more inflation. You get a bigger socialist, big government. You get a harm to our economy. And from the whole perspective of the roads being built, we had a bill that went forward that had the opportunity to build more roads, less money, have the reforms to get it done, and you didn't have to have the Green New Deal. Yes, sir.
Senator McCarthy, the January 6th Select Committee has said that they could issue subpoenas as soon as this week. If you're among the group who is subpoenaed either for your information or for an interview, how will you respond to that subpoena, and are you advising your fellow members of Congress that could face subpoenas as to how they should respond?
You know, I haven't received any subpoena, but it just goes to show this is more about politics than anything else. There's only two questions that this committee should actually be looked upon. Why was the Capitol left so ill-prepared, and how can we make sure that this never happens again? But that's not what they're focused on. Yes, ma'am.
On the debt ceiling, Republicans do not want to help Democrats raise the debt ceiling. You guys voted against the CR that the debt ceiling was suspended in. It looks like Democrats it's going to be a process for them to get this $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill through, which is the argument for how they should raise the debt ceiling on their own. So the debt ceiling needs to be done by mid-October. How are Republicans not responsible for a financial crisis caused by not raising the debt ceiling if Democrats aren't able to do it on their own by mid-October?
Because it's perfect, because they can't. Democrats control the White House, the Senate, and the House. They want to raise $5 trillion and spend in the next month. You have a maxed out credit card, and they want to get a new limit to go max out another one. In reconciliation, within the Senate, they have the ability to carve out just for a debt ceiling to vote. They have a hard time doing that on their own because it may harm them in raising all that money. But they are in the majority. They control what comes to the floor. So they have wasted all this time. The only people that will get any blame for this is the Democrats and their management. We've watched crisis after crisis, from the border to Afghanistan to now putting our debt into crisis. Why would they move a bill that they know not pass? And they even took out the Iron Dome funding in it to try to get their most liberal people to vote for it. They know it's not going anywhere in the Senate, so why did they waste that time? Why didn't they take the time to wall off the reconciliation with the debt ceiling, pass it in the House, and pass it in the Senate so people in America would not be harmed? Because they cannot manage. That's the only answer to the question, yes.
Americans are going to
follow up on that. The Treasury Secretary was just here
Mhm.
with the Speaker and Leader's Chamber. Can you talk a little bit more about your conversations with her last week? And at this point, is there anything that can change your mind about supporting a debt limit suspension or increase?
I'm not going to increase a debt limit to spend another $5 trillion in the next month when we have inflation and small businesses being hurt. That's not the place for it. The Democrats control the House, the Senate, and the White House. The Democrats have a mechanism already in place to use reconciliation to pass it with a simple majority of the members in the Senate. If they want to raise and spend another $5 trillion, that's what they need to do. They understand that. But what they're doing is causing havoc for the country and others. I've worked with our Secretary of Treasury when she was with the Fed when we raised the debt ceiling before. I do not see why the Democrats are making more problems with the economy simply from the fact that they're not managing. Why did the Speaker spend her time in Europe when she knew this was coming forward? Why do they only have us back here for 2 weeks when they know this challenge is before us? Why do they make it to the last minute to make it harder for our economy and others? It's all a mismanagement on their part. They control the floor, they control the Senate, they control the White House. If they want another $5 trillion of spending, they need to raise the debt ceiling.
What you conveyed to the Secretary?
Very clearly, yes. Secretary and I had a very good discussion. We've been through this before. I was the majority whip when we passed it the other time. My conversation with her, take Mitch McConnell at his word. Stop playing political games with this. Don't take us down this path. Start working your reconciliation. Don't waste another week like they wasted this week with a CR that was not going anywhere. They knew it. She knew it on the phone as well. Yes, ma'am.
The federal deficit through the first 11 months of this fiscal year was 2.7 trillion, and the federal debt is now over 28 trillion. Will President Biden or Speaker Pelosi ever balance the budget?
Not if they continue to add another 5 trillion. Our GDP is about 23. You've got a real challenge. Every great society has collapsed where they've overextended themselves. And this is exactly the path that the Democrats have put us on. The inflation that they have created with their spending when first coming into office continues to contribute to this and the harm that it'll cause to business and growth and for future generations of Americans. They're putting it as a path that deals a great deal of amount of damage. I remember listening to a number of years ago on the Joint Chiefs of Staff said the greatest threat to our nation wasn't a foreign enemy, it was the debt. And the Democrats have done nothing but add to it. Yes.
McCarthy, but if most of this debt, 98% of it, predates President Biden's
Not true.
inauguration, why don't Republicans have the responsibility to help raise the debt limit?
That's a great question, but your question is not correct. Let me educate you on one point. The last debt ceiling we raised was on a date certain, not a dollar amount. So the date certain, every amount of money spent in the Trump administration was accounted for and also went into the 7 months of the current Biden administration. The reason why have a challenge of raising the debt now is because the Democrats want to spend another $5 trillion. So for every family member at home that's sitting in a tough situation, that they're spending more than that they bring in, that they're using all their credit cards to live off month after month, and the credit cards have now hit that limit. What they're now asking is, can we get more credit cards and max them out in the first month of getting them? That's what the Democrats are doing, but they're making it a worse problem and situation. They control the House, they control the Senate, they control the White House. They have a mechanism that they're utilizing to spend another $5 trillion. In that mechanism also allows them to raise the debt ceiling with their own members. That's what they would have to do to make that happen. I don't believe it's smart for America to spend another $5 trillion. I'm opposed to that. I would think most every American would be opposed to that, especially the next generation.
Leader, I wanted to ask you about the Women's Health Protection Act. I asked Speaker Pelosi earlier, and she said about the Archdiocese and the Archbishop of San Francisco warned that this bill is nothing more than a child sacrifice and urging Catholics to pray and fast to defeat the bill. What's your reaction to this pro-life and pro-abortion agenda?
What the Democrats are bringing before us, it's really a radical bill. It goes beyond Roe v. Wade. It allows abortion on demand up until birth. It shows how far left Democrats have become. 219 Democrats, I believe, have co-sponsored that, to have abortion up until birth. Regardless of how you feel about the situation, that is not the place I believe Americans are at. But they're going to spend their time pushing that onto the floor, putting American economic in doubt when they should be dealing with the economics of what they have before them.
So, going back to the recommendation that your members opposed the infrastructure bill, I'm curious, since there were 19 Senate Republicans who did vote for that, including Leader McConnell, have you talked to him about your decision to recommend voting against it?
I talk to McConnell all the time. People have difference of opinion, but the one thing I think everybody now sees is what the bill passed in the Senate is a different situation now that it came to the House. Every single Democrat you can ask from Pelosi on down that it's one bill. So you're not voting for a $1.5 trillion infrastructure bill, you're voting for a $5 trillion bill. That they will hold it unless it goes forward. They have their internal firing squad right now upset with each other because one side won't vote for it unless they get reconciliation. So whatever agreement they come upon is not about the infrastructure bill. It's about whether they can spend $5 trillion. That's different than what they saw in the Senate.
Last question. They are planning to vote for the infrastructure bill on its own without the reconciliation bill Monday or Tuesday.
If Pelosi keeps her word.
If she keeps her word.
Will she send it to the White House or will she hold it at the desk? Because she's talked about holding it as well. And the progressives on the other side, on the Democratic side, said they won't vote for it unless she will. So, interesting.
Mr. Leader, there's at least four Republicans who have indicated they'll back the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Fitzpatrick, Tom
Reed, Adam Kinzinger, and Fred Upton. What is your message to those 4 members and others who might back that infrastructure?
The only thing I would say to them, it's a different situation than it was when it came out of the Senate. You watched that the so-called moderate Democrats put a letter together with 10 names that they would not move reconciliation until they got the infrastructure bill, and in 48 hours they collapsed and didn't get the infrastructure bill, and not only moved the beginning of reconciliation, they deemed it where you couldn't even debate it. I think in speaking to a lot of those members at the time, that changed their opinion of whether they should support that bill or not. I don't view it as a vote for infrastructure. It's a vote for $5 trillion. And I don't believe America can afford that now. And I don't believe it's the best when we have inflation, we have a border that's out of control, we have Americans held hostage in Afghanistan, and we have a White House ignoring every crisis before them but only trying to create a new one. Thank you all. Have a good day.